Hey everyone, I recently partnered with Whatnot and am now officially an affiliate. For those of you who don't know, Whatnot is an awesome shopping platform that enables anyone to turn their passions into a business. Here you can find tons of live streams featuring the products that you love, including One Piece boosters, singles, and slabs. Plus, if you use the link in the description below, you can receive $10 free. Make sure to check it out so you don't miss out. Hey everyone, adakai TCG here, and I'm coming at you guys with a OP07 tier list video. And so I finally got around to doing some testing for OP07. My locals had allowed OP07 proxies beginning like a week and a half ago, so we've been playing and getting our first take, getting our feet wet into that meta. And yeah, I just wanted to bring this tier list after running some test games and seeing the new support that's come out. And so again, a quick disclaimer, these are just my opinions after my own testing, but if you guys see that I've placed a leader that you feel strongly doesn't belong in the tier that I've mentioned, please let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear about any new tech that I'm missing out on, or maybe there's something that I'm overvaluing as well. And so I'm always looking to grow as well and to hear your guys' opinions. And so yeah, let me know. Would be very interested to hear that. But let's begin. All right, so the first thing I want to go over is defining each tier. And so I broke it down into, I guess, 6 different tiers. The first being meta defining. Now, I think in every set there is at least 1 or 2 decks that really define the meta, meaning that they are usually very strong decks that have pretty even, if not advantaged, matchups into most of the other decks. And so, yeah, that's what kind of defines that meta for that set. And so we saw that in Sakazuki, we saw that in, even Moria, Anel in the past. And so, and of course, Whitebeard, Law, Zoro, these were all very meta defining decks. These are the ones that you would run into when you go to big competitions and the ones that play consistently well. And these are often the gatekeepers as well to other decks from shining. And so we have that as the very top. The next is highly competitive. So these are the decks that can stand their own against the meta defining decks. And in this tier in particular, the way I'm defining it is, I would not be surprised seeing it in the top 8 or even actually taking 1 or 2 big tournaments. And so that's kind of that tier. The one below that is competitive. The way I kind of define that is like top 32, top 64, the ones that will generally go pretty positive and have a decent matchup and could be a decent leader to take into any big competitive tournaments. Below that is rogue decks, and so these are decks that I'm going to put leaders that I think with the right pilot and the right person kind of giving it the time to cook out a deck list could become a competitive deck or even a highly competitive deck. I think there are a lot of underexplored leaders in the One Piece card game, being that it's much easier to do what's tried and true than to invest time to see if something else works if you don't know for sure, and so that's kind of how I'm going to define the rogue decks for this tier list. Below that is locals. These are leaders that I think are fine generally, have decent leader abilities, but oftentimes may just be gate kept by the meta defining decks. And so I could see them topping the locals, but maybe not a bigger event. And then the very last tier is the oof tier. These are leaders that, man, they got the short end of the stick when they were printed. And so, yeah, I think the way we can start this is kind of defining what I think will be meta defining for this set. And then we can place the other leaders in relation to those meta defining decks. And so, to no one's surprise, I do think Red Purple Law is a very meta-defining deck. Again, with the EB01 support, we saw it starting to sneak up into the competitive scene. Now with 07, it's picking up just a few more cards. And yeah, it is a very meta-defining deck. It does a lot. It removes pieces from the board, from your opponent's board, while developing your own. It has draw power. It has good sustainability. It can go wide. It can go fast. It's a very flexible deck, and I think we're going to start seeing even more people on Law and even hitting higher ceilings with the deck. I think it's a deck that the skill ceiling is quite high, and so the more people are on this deck, the harder it's going to be to play against this deck. And so yeah, I really do think that this is going to be one of the meta-defining decks for this set, along with Black Yellow Luffy. So Black Yellow Luffy was pretty strong in 06, got even better support in EB01, but then now with 07, it has like the 5-drop Luffy as well, and so it got even better support, and so it's a very strong deck. A lot of its consistency issues were fixed through the different support cards they got from EB01 and 07. And so I do think that this is going to be another very, very strong meta-defining deck, where if your deck cannot answer both of these leaders, it's going to have a hard time in any bigger tournament. I do think that these two are the only true meta-defining decks. I had thought about Enel and Lucci, but again, I do think Enel and Lucci are probably two of the highly competitive decks, probably the top tier of it. You can argue that it's a low meta defining, but again, when I kind of defined what that tier would entail, I do think that there is a separation between these two decks as far as level of strength. And so yeah, these are kind of going to be the baseline of how we're going to be defining these tiers, and then we'll do everything in relation to these decks. And so again, I do think Lucci is really, really strong. He's really fun too, and it's also another deck that I think has a super, super high skill ceiling. It's a very difficult deck to pilot. It requires you to have a good knowledge of the matchup as well as good graveyard management. And yeah, I do think even though it struggles into Black Yellow Luffy, there is tech that you can use to combat the Black Yellow Luffy, being the Zombie Luffy or the 6-drop Brook. You do have ways to mitigate the blocker Sabo. And so again, I do think it's probably one of the most highly competitive decks going into 07. And so if you guys want a deck that's not red purple law, but also very, very high skill ceiling, I would recommend Rob Lucci. And then Enel, I do think with the new support that Enel got from 07 as well, he will be quite a menace as well. Yeah, I'm excited to see what people do with this deck. I know it's quite annoying to play into. I've had first-hand experience playing into the 07 Enel, and yeah, it just got even crazier from his previous iteration. And so, yeah, so these are that. Let's move on. I'll put Zoro first. I think Zoro, man, it's crazy, but I do think he's probably on the lower end of competitive. I don't think Zoro can really match into any of the top leaders that well. But it seems like in at least the West, people always somehow make Zoro work. And so I never doubt the aggression that people have in the West. And so I'm going to put him probably in the low end of competitive. But again, you could argue that he's lower than that. But yeah, I do think that we will see him maybe top 64 with a few NA players. Going on to Red Green Law, I do think Red Green Law got quite a few new awesome cards into with the release of 07, but I don't think he's quite there yet. I don't think he can quite deal with some of the meta-defining leaders. But yeah, I think I would not be surprised if I saw him top 64 either, though, especially with some of the new Supernova cards that we got. So I'm going to put him also in the low end of competitive. Yeah, these two, it's crazy to see how much they've fallen, but again, it just gave space for other decks to shine. Let's go see what's next. We'll go to Blue Dofi. I do think Blue Doflamingo will be a highly competitive deck, and I think it's going to continue to be a highly competitive deck going into 08 and as well as when the new starters release. Some of the support that they've been releasing for the 7 Warlords type have been amazing, and so I've played against this deck in one of my locals. One of my buddies was running it. It can go wide, it can go aggressive, it can keep drawing cards. Blue also has a Diablo Jambe now, which is crazy. I learned that the hard way. And so I do think there is some viability to Blue Doflamingo, and I think we will see it pop up here and there in the competitive scene. Red Green Luffy, oh man, I'm gonna have to put it in the locals. I know I've seen people trying to make this leader work. I just don't see it. I think compared to the other leaders, it does not really hold its own, but I would not be surprised to see a top of locals, here and there. Catch some people off guard. But as far as like a big event, playing consistently for 10, 11 rounds, I don't see it doing that well. Blurple Kaido, again, I think he's just like kind of a keep at your locals leader. I think this deck it's not bad, but I don't think it can hold its own to the top meta decks, and so gotta put it there. Blurble Croc, I know some people have been cooking with this deck, trying to make it work for a very, very long time. I haven't seen any results from it. Even when I played against it, I saw it got stronger, but I don't see it topping anytime soon, and so I'm gonna have to put that at locals. King is probably my first oof. Again, purple does have ways to ramp much higher and much quicker than it did previously, just because of all the support it has. But I do think King's ability is just generically pretty bad, and so honestly, you probably could win the locals with him if you really tried hard. But I'm gonna keep him in oof as our first oof leader. Going forward, we have Whitebeard. I do think Whitebeard will still be a competitive deck. Again, the West just does not let this leader die. They find new ways to cook with him. I think he will do better than Law and Zoro, but I do think that he's still on the lower end of competitive. With the new leaders coming out and the new support that some of the decks have gotten, I do think that it's just becoming harder and harder for Whitebeard to maintain its place in the super competitive scene. But again, we've seen just in 06 as well that being a 6k leader, 6 life, having that card advantage too, is quite nice still. And so, yeah, gonna keep him in the lower end of competitive. Garp, I do have a soft spot for Garp, but again, I just think he's a keep at locals. I just don't think he does quite enough, even with the support he's gotten. I don't think he can keep his own against any of the higher competitive decks, and so As much as I love this character, I love this leader, I think I got to keep him at locals. Kinemon, so yeah, well, he's a locals guy. He's better than an oof, but again, he's not really. He doesn't have enough or do enough to be in the competitive scene, in my opinion. Yeah, sadly, I do love this leader too. I've played him a lot. I like the Wano package. I just don't think that he does enough. If you want to play Wano, I think you should just play Red Green Odin, which we can put Red Green Odin on. I'm going to put Red Green Odin in Rogue. I think this is a deck that may have something there, you know. I think someone has to cook it, but it does have a pretty decent matchup into Law, where your leader's becoming a 6k quite easily. And then a lot of the good Wano cards sit at 7k, which requires Law to commit more than just the Gordon or raise max to bottom deck. And so, yeah, I do think that because of that, he could be kind of a rogue deck, but I just don't see how he beats Lucci. Yeah, I think Lucci just arbitrarily wipes Odin off the map. And so, yeah, so I'm going to keep him at rogue. I do think that there exists a deck list out there that would make him a little bit more viable, but for now, we'll keep him there. Green Odin, oof. Not much to explain there. His ability is lackluster. Not a lot of great support. A lot of the Wano cards dead in hands, which red-green Odin can kind of deal with, but yeah, being green Odin, no way. Blue-green Sanji, oof tier. Not much to explain there. We'll keep him there. Kairos. So Kairos, the black-yellow color is strong, and it does have some fun support, but it feels like it's missing something. I'm gonna put him in locals because I do know some people that really try to make him work, and has shown that he's got some viability, but and yeah, he's just not there yet. Hannibal 2, not quite as bad as Oof, but let's put him in locals because yeah, I don't think that he's all there yet. Ivankov, that's interesting too. I'm between Rogue and locals, honestly. I know that he has kind of been a sleeper pick into the EB meta. I don't see him holding up his own once we hit 07. Yeah, we'll put him in locals. I think with the introduction of the new support that some of the other leaders got, I don't think that Ivankov really got that much more outside of the EB01. What's that card that he got? The scissor guy. But yeah, outside of that, I don't think he gets that much in 07, and he already wasn't doing that well in 06, so I gotta put him in locals. Magellan, again, locals as well. I think he's probably higher than some of these other decks in locals, but he's not quite there yet. Again, just missing some new support. We saw a lot of other leaders get buffed, but if you want to play purple, I'd argue play red purple Law or even purple Luffy. Just does everything much better. Z. Z. I kind of want to put him in Rogue, but I'm going to put him in locals too. This locals list is going to be quite large. There's a lot of leaders that, again, I think have decent abilities, but just quite aren't there yet in terms of the highly competitive scene. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see some of these jump into a Rogue-like status in some tournaments, but again, for now, I'm going to have to put them all in locals. Smoker 2, again, I think once this new starter that comes out, so with some of the cards that we've seen, I think this that will breathe new life into Smoker, but if you're going to be playing a black leader, I think Lucci right now just does everything much better, especially with the new support that we get in 07. Lucci definitely takes much more advantage of it than any other black leader can do. Ace as well, we'll keep it at locals. I do love this red leader, but again, I don't think that he's too competitive to say. Yeah, so I would be very surprised to see him outside of locals. Kuro, definitely locals. This deck used to be really gas, but with how the new meta shapes up and no support from him, he will not last in the competitive scene. Yeah, Lucci will just KO everything. Law will just bottom deck everything. You won't be able to use his effect. It'll just be pretty rough all around. Arlo, I'm going to put in Rogue. Yeah, green and yellow just keep getting generically pretty good cards. And so I do think that there exists an Arlong deck out there that can sneak into the meta and at least give a few of these highly competitive decks a run for their money. Nami, I'm going to put in competitive in the low, mid end of competitive. I do think it does get harder and harder for Nami each set. But again, there are some new cards that she got in 07 as well that people have been using and testing. And so I think people will always just be on Nami. And Nami will also gatekeep some of these other decks too. And so I'm going to put her in like the mid tier of competitive. Iceberg, I'm going to say locals. I know there's a ton of Iceberg believers out there. I've seen the deck like ramp up and go wide so quickly and keep good hand size, but honestly, with a leader that can't attack, it just still feels quite underwhelming. And so I'm going to have to put him in locals. Lucci. Hot take, I'm going to put Lucci in Rogue. I do think that this Lucci could catch some of these decks by surprise. It is a CP leader, and so it can take advantage of some of the CP cards that we've gotten and some of the CP package. And so with that, I don't think this leader is nearly as good as the new 07 Lucci, but I do think that there exists a deck list there, and him being able to swing twice could hurt both Law and Monkey D. Luffy, the black yellow one. And so I don't want to count him out just yet. I want to keep him in Rogue. I think that this deck could catch some people by surprise. Black Yellow Big Mom, gonna put in locals. Great colors. Could use Moria, but again, I just don't think that she's quite there yet. Her leader ability, having to attach to and then rest to, is just too much of a commitment for what it does. And so, yeah, unless there's a lot more mid-range support for a deck like this, I think it does seem underwhelming a little bit. But I could be wrong. Please let me know. I know there's a lot of believers in this deck, and so, yeah. Katakuri, I just don't think that feels wrong to put him lower than competitive. So I'm going to put Katakuri in the lower end of competitive. The reject ban really did hurt this deck. Having that aggression really is what allowed this deck to kind of thrive. Of course, if you hit good triggers, this deck can still roll, but I do think that with how fast RP Law is and how unfavored that matchup is for Katakuri, it does kind of gatekeep him from being really good into the meta. And so, yeah, I'm going to put him in the lower end of competitive, but I think that's even being generous. Green Purple Dofi. I think that Grape Dofi is actually a rogue deck. It has a really good matchup, or not really good, but I think it's slightly favored into Law. And it did have some new support and some new cards you can kind of play around with 07. So I do think that if someone were to take the time to cook with this deck, we could see something happen. So excited to see if anyone does, but we'll move on. VV, I feel like I'm gonna get in trouble if I put it in oof, but I'm gonna put VV in oof. I just don't. The leader just is trying to do too many things that it doesn't do anything at all, in my opinion. I've never faced the VV where I was like, this deck is actually doing something really cool. It just seems like every VV deck iteration that I've seen, it just feels very underwhelming. I mean, maybe the lower end of locals. I don't think it's quite as bad as oof, but yeah. Isho 2, lower end of locals. This deck just play Perona instead. Perona does everything this deck wants to do, but better. Blue, yeah, black and blue Rebecca. Yeah, I'm gonna put Rebecca in locals. I do think that she does have something there for her, but I don't know that it can keep up with the new meta. Yeah, we'll keep her in locals. Queen, I think it's a locals deck as well. I think everything Queen wants to do, Enel just does much better. And yeah, I think if you want to play a Queen-like deck, just play Enel. Purple, yellow, Croc, I'm going to put in Rogue. I do think that this deck can still cook in 07. We've seen a top in the end of 06, the EB01 format. Yeah, I think that it still has some strong support. It still can do what it wants to do. I wouldn't be surprised to see a top, at least top 32. So, but I'll keep it in Rogue because I don't think many people are on it. Red, Black, Sabo. So I do think this is a Rogue deck too. I think that with the current amount of KO power that a lot of decks have, Red, Black, Sabo having his leader ability to prevent one of those KOs from happening could be quite strong. Maybe locals, but yeah, no, I'm going to keep it in the lower end of Rogue. I think someone just needs to cook this deck. I think that there's something there with, you know, some of the Revolutionary Army support with, you know, we got the new Rust Dragon. I think there could be some viability in this deck, but someone would have to really put in a lot of effort to go through the testing because there's so many ways you can build a Red Black Sabo deck, right? There's so many packages now that we have. The Straw Hat packages, the Revolutionary Army packages, Navy package. You know, you have all different types of packages for that you can run with those two colors. And although they don't synergize quite as well, being red and black, there could be a balance out there that I think would work well into some of these competitive decks. And so we'll keep them at Rogue. Bella Betty, definitely locals. I think it's just a little bit too inconsistent still. I'm going to have to put Rosinante at locals too. I think that he just folds to some of the meta decks that we have currently. Sakazuki, banned. I'm just going to keep him in oof. Purple Luffy. I'm going to put him in the high end of Rogue. So he didn't get that much more than the blocker Sanji, but that blocker Sanji is a great add to this deck. And especially with Sakazuki being out of the meta now, I do think that Purple Luffy may have its time to shine in this meta. But again, I'd have to see it. Someone would have to cook that deck and tech it against kind of the meta-defining decks, and then we may see some results there. Red, Purple, Uta, we're going to put in Oof. Perona, we're going to put in highly competitive. This deck is really good. The Wano Perona version, I think it has a great matchup and into a lot of the competitive decks. it can definitely hold its own, and it is really frustrating to play against. And so look out for it. It's going to be a sleeper pick into the competitive scene. Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of people that pilot it well in the regionals and treasure cups. Hody, definitely an oof. Yamato, oh man, it doesn't feel quite right, but yeah, we'll put him in lower end of competitive. I do think that Yamato in 07 will not be as good as it was in 06, but again, red-yellow has so many good combination of cards that it can do, and there's so many ways you can build this Yamato deck. It actually is one of the most flexible leaders that we have, and so as far as how you build it, and so I do think that someone may end up cooking a deck that works well into the meta that we're seeing, and so I'll leave it in like the mid-lower end of competitive. Moria, again, I think it's in like the lower end of competitive. It doesn't get that much new support in 07, but it still just has a generically strong effect. And so I think it's something more like this. Yeah, so I think Moria will still be quite strong, but just not as good as Lucci or some of these other decks. And so if you're on Moria, I would just say play Lucci. But again, if you really like this leader, you can probably stick with it and get away with it. Dragon, man. So I have a soft spot for people like leaders like Dragon because he reminds me of Starter 1 Luffy, and that's one of my favorite leaders of all time. I'm going to put him in Rogue. I think his effect is generically just really good, right? You can recycle some of the Dawn that you've attached. Red just isn't there power-wise currently without the assistance of another color. But again, I think with maybe there's just a deck out there that can utilize that effect well. I do think that could exist, and so someone cook Dragon. Let me know. I don't want to write him off as a bad leader because I do think his effect is quite strong, and so yeah, someone please cook with him. I would love to see that deck list. Reiju, I'm gonna have to put it in locals. Reiju's strong. I think it's strong against a lot of these decks. It's just really unfortunate that it hard loses to Red Purple Law, and we're gonna be seeing a ton of Red Purple Law. If that ever changes, I think Reiju can move up, but for now, I think he's just a keep at locals because Law will ruin your day. So, Bonnie, I think, is going to be a highly competitive deck. Maybe something like this. So Bonnie's effect is really great. She can rest any leader or character when your opponent's attacking. You can rest one Dawn to rest the leader or character, which really messes with your opponent's attack order. It messes with their blockers. It's just a really strong ability that forces your opponent to play a certain way, and which can make it more predictable and easier to defend against your opponent. And so, yeah, really strong card. Has a lot of great support. Only reason why I think she's kind of struggling a little bit is because I do think that Green has a tough matchup into Lucci in general. It seems like anything that Green kind of puts on the board, Lucci will be able to remove arbitrarily. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. If you guys have found some tech that works in that matchup. But I do think it's quite tough. Boa, I also think is pretty competitive. Yeah, I think it's a strong effect. Anytime you're able to draw cards, it's great. Blue got a few good new cards, and yeah, I do think that I wouldn't be surprised to see it topping some events, but again, I think what Blue struggles with is Black in general too, and so I'd be interested to see how people tech against Lucci when they're playing people like Boa. And so Egghead or Vegapunk. Man, so I wanted this leader to be so good, but I just don't think it's there. Yeah, I'm gonna put it and keep it at locals. It's a fun effect and it's a fun deck to play, but it just feels like it's not quite there. And so yeah, I'm gonna have to put it in top of locals. Definitely give it a shot if you guys wanted to try out Egghead. I think the cards are all very cool. Just being a 2-life leader that can't attack is just it's too neg. I just don't like leaders that can't attack. You'd have to have like a really, 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 really good ability, which I just don't think it compensates for the leader being able to attack. And so, yeah. Next is Foxy. I'm gonna put Foxy in locals as well. I wanted this deck to be good too, but it's just a little underwhelming. Again, if I were to play a purple deck in the meta, I think I would still choose purple Luffy. The Foxy support, it's okay. It's fun, but I don't think it's going to be topping anytime soon. Red Uta, easily an oof. Blue Luffy, we'll put in locals. So starter Luffy, I'm going to keep it locals, even though he's one of my favorite leaders. Croc, also keep it locals. I don't think that he has as great of an ability as the other 2 blue decks or 3 blue decks, and so yeah, we'll keep him at locals. Kid, I'm gonna put Kid in Rogue. So I do think that there are other stronger green decks for sure, but again, Kid's a Supernova leader. Supernova got some new support. Double attack will always be a thing, and so I do think that there could be a deck list out there that could utilize that well. I do think Lucci will kind of gatekeep it, but yeah, just having a double attack may just be enough for Kid to be viable. Kaido, I'm gonna put at locals. I think if you're gonna play a purple leader again, just play purple Luffy. Shanks, oof. Yellow Big Mom, locals. Black Sakazuki, oof. Black Luffy. So yeah, I'm gonna have to put Black Luffy in locals for 07, I think. I am still working on this deck. Maybe I could put it in Rogue, because I'm working on it. But I do think that with the way that Black support's shaping out, you'll fall behind in the Lucci matchup quite easily, just because utilizing some of the stronger Black cards that we have now requires you to have a good consistent trash. Lucci is going to be able to do that quite easily, while you aren't going to be able to do that quite easily, and so I do think 07's the first meta where, yeah, he's going to be at locals. I'm so sad about that, but who knows? Maybe with the new starter deck releasing, I may try some of those cards and try to make something work with this Black Luffy, but for now, I'm going to keep him at locals. Yellow Yamato, your locals. Red Purple Luffy, I do think is a competitive deck. Probably up here somewhere. He does have a great matchup into Law. I do think that he can hold his own in the Black Yellow Luffy matchup, as well as even the Lucci matchup too. Maybe struggles a bit into an L, but again, I do think that he is quite a competitive leader. He got some new good support, and yeah, I think that people should definitely try him out. Red Purple Kid, again, probably keep it locals. I wanted this deck to work so much. I think when Sakazuki was in the meta, he was actually a little bit better, to be honest, but with Sakazuki gone and some of his other decks being in the picture, I do think that Red Purple Kid is just not quite there yet. Blue Green Sanji, or Blue Green Sanji Zoro. I'm gonna have to go put him and keep him at locals. I think I did see some decks in the East that were running this leader, but I don't think it's quite as competitive as some of these other decks, and so I could be wrong. Maybe it goes to Rogue, but I just haven't seen a deck and tested a deck that felt good enough to be a Rogue deck either, and so Uta, I'm going to put in competitive. Again, I do think that Uta does actually fold to Black Lucci, but it also is a very consistent deck that plays pretty evenly into Law, and so and I think could have a decent matchup into Black Yellow Luffy. So I'm going to keep it in competitive. It is one of the most consistent decks because you're drawing so much, you're seeing so many of your cards, and so yeah, definitely going to keep that there. Red Yellow Sabo, man, I think it goes on the top of Rogue. I think that this deck is really gas and just needs someone to tinker with it a little bit more. The red-yellow package is quite strong, and this effect is so much more consistent than the Bella Betty effect. And yeah, you having the access to become a higher power leader allows you to be a little bit more defensive as well. Having the red package lets you be aggressive. Yellow, manipulate life and triggers. There is a deck that exists out there that I think could bump this into the competitive scene. But for now, I'm going to leave it at the very top of Rogue. Blue, Yellow, Ace. You know, I'm going to put this deck in Rogue, even though I do think it's missing one or two things to make it really pop. But I've seen some deck lists and some variations of it, and it does seem to do quite a lot when it sees the right cards. But again, it's that consistency factor, right? If you're not hitting your leader ability, there are ways to mitigate that, right? With the new 5-drop Ace being able to reorder the top of your life, or not your life, your top of your deck. You can kind of, or rather, you draw 2 cards and place 2 cards on the top of your deck. That's what it was. And so there are ways that you can mitigate the chances for his ability to go off, but yeah, I don't know if I've seen a deck list yet that truly feels like it's consistent enough to be super competitive. But again, I do think there is a lot more exploration to be done here. And so I guess that's kind of the fine thing about Rogue, right? I think with the right amount of exploration, Rogue decks will either fall into the competitive or go up to the competitive or fall down to locals, right? But I think that the reason why it's in Rogue is because I don't think that there's enough people looking into these leaders and testing them out fully. And so I highly recommend you guys to be part of the Rogue crew that just really puts in the effort to try to make these leaders work. Just to get more data out there, right? And then if you really don't want to play any of these other decks. But again, yeah. Lastly, we have the starter 14 new Luffy. I wanted this leader to be so good too, but I'm going to have to keep it at locals. It just doesn't do enough in the current scene. But again, I still am testing. I've only got to test a few games with it, and so maybe there's a deck list out there that I should be testing with, and maybe you guys know that. Please let me know in the comments below if you've found some sauce, and you can share it with me, because I do love both of these Luffy leaders. And so, yeah, let me know what you guys thought. But yeah, I think this is my tier list. I know this has been a longer video. I've been just kind of rambling on with what I thought, but let me see if there's anything else I'd reorder. Yeah, I do think I'm going to drop down the Law and the Zoro from competitive to Rogue. Yeah, I think these are strong decks, but it doesn't feel right to keep them in the competitive list. And so I'm going to drop them to Rogue. I do think that they can work with the right iteration and the right testing, but I do think that I'd be surprised to see these really topping or winning any events. And so, yeah, let me know what you guys think. This is my initial take. Again, I'll probably do an update video once we get further into the meta and I do some more testing. But yeah, let me know what you guys think below. If you guys have any contradictory thoughts, I would seriously love to hear them. Or maybe there's, just some things I've missed. And so let me know, guys. I'm going to stop the recording here. Thank you guys for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe. We'd love to keep the conversation going, guys. But thanks for watching.